So this will be just 3 quick problems on domain. So the first one does come from your 4.1 quiz. So to find the domain, the issues that we have are the fraction and then the square root. So really what I want you to think about is we would be allowed to take 1 over the square root of a positive number, but you wouldn't be allowed to take 1 over the square root of a negative number, and you wouldn't be able to take 1 over the square root of 0. These would not be okay. So we're going to create a sign chart, and we're going to care only about the positive numbers in our sign chart. So first thing we do, take what's underneath the square root, set it equal to 0, and I get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 20. Make sure you have the plus or minus. So here we go. Negative square root of 20, positive square root of 20. When we substitute those values in, we get zeros. So where I'm substituting back into is here. Where did I get that? I got that from, let's see, here, underneath the square root. So now, if I put in 0, I end up getting a positive value. If I put in negative 100, I get a negative. Positive 100, I get a negative. But remember, we said on the sign chart, we're only going to care about where the positives are. So for this function, the domain is open interval, negative root of 20 to positive root of 20. The endpoints are not included because that would cause the fraction to have a 0 at the bottom, or the denominator. Number 2, so I did change this from the problem that you got on the quiz. Log says that we can take the log base 3 of a positive number, and that's it. You can't take the log base 3 of a negative, and you can't take the log base 3 of 0. These two do not work. So same thing, we're only going to care about our positive values. So x squared minus 4, first thing you do, make it equal to 0. How do I decide what I make equal to 0? I take what's inside of the log, because log is the issue. Log is why we have a domain problem. So I get x squared is equal to 4, x is equal to plus or minus 2. So here's f. There's negative 2, there's positive 2. These would give me zeros. I'm going to put 0 in the middle, which will give me negative, give me positive. So we only care about the positive. So my domain has now become negative infinity to negative 2 open, union with 2 to positive infinity. We do not use negatives and we do not use zeros. Number 3, from the actual quiz. So what we want to look at is you can take the fourth root of a positive. You could take the fourth root of 0. You cannot take the fourth root of a negative. So when you do your sign chart, you're going to look for zeros and positives. Here we go. I'm going to take what's underneath the square root, because that's the issue of the domain, and I'm going to factor out the negative. And I'm going to factor this to be minus 6 plus 3. So I get x equals 6 and x equals negative 3. So those are my zeros. Now, I want you to be very, very careful. Most people got this confused. Yes, that negative is still part of the sign chart. So I'm going to use that part to make my sign. So if I'm going to pick a value in the middle, I pick 0, I would have a negative symbol. Then I would have 0 minus 6, which would be negative. And then I would have 0 plus 3, which would be positive. So this would be positive. If I pick 100, I would have negative times a positive times a positive. That's negative. If I had negative 1 million, I'd have the negative in front, I'd have a negative in the middle, and I have a negative in the end. So I still have a negative. But we said we would use zeros and positives. So I'm allowed to use that. I'm allowed to use this. I'm allowed to use the pointing. So those are 3 quick questions on domain. The only problem that I mentioned that you wouldn't have to do a sign chart for would be something like f of x is equal to 3 over x squared minus 2x minus 24. In this case, the only thing we care about is the fact that you can't have 0 at the bottom of the fraction. So we just look for the zeros. Positives and negatives don't matter. I'm going to factor this. And the reason I don't need a sign chart, these are the values that are not in the domain. Every other value is used in the function.